Suburban Witch here, and today I am sharing with you my personal story of leaving my religion, which was Pentecostal Christian, and falling into witchcraft, which is my current spiritual views, and how I dealt with all of that. So I'm going to answer some questions that my followers have given me on my Instagram when I put out the call last week. So hopefully you find value in today's content and that it helps you on your own spiritual journey as well. So I've had a little bit of trouble figuring out how to start this all off. The questions that I asked you guys to send through have been a great help. So I'll just go through what they're going to be so you know whether you want to stick around and find out more. The first one is going to be how I dealt with the shame of giving up on a personal faith, God and family, how I felt losing friends and community, the fear of hell, telling my family and friends of my new beliefs, and did I receive any backlash from friends and family in deciding not to return to the church. So those are some questions I'm going to go through today. What I'm going to do first though is just give you a rundown of my history so you understand where I'm coming from and the journey that I went through to get to where I am today. It may be a little long, I'm not sure. I've actually never really spoken this story out loud. The people in my life around me either know it or have heard it in bits and pieces, but I've never sat down and just got it out. So I have a feeling it's just going to flow, but we will see. I've changed my little setup here so that I've got my nice cozy chair. I even have my nice cozy cushion that my grandmother wove for me. She's a hand weaving artist. And so that's just going to help me because it does feel a little bit scary and vulnerable to talk about this stuff. And there is a lot of stuff there to go through, so stay tuned. So I'm going to begin at the very start. I was raised as a Pentecostal Christian, also known as a born-again Christian. You may know the church that I was in as a charismatic Christian church, very loud Christians. Jumping, some people call them happy clappers, which is not a very nice term, although it is very true. Lots of clapping, lots of singing, lots of Christian rock music, definitely doing their best to feel cool and up with the times to get more followers and more young people into the fold. My mother went to Bible college when I think I was about 9 years old, and that was her way of getting into the women's ministry. So I had grandparents who were preachers and missionaries and would go around Southeast Asia giving testimonies of healings and all sorts of miraculous events. I had a mother in the women's ministry and she did a lot for the church. She was actually fantastic. She would host things like a Christmas Day lunch for those who didn't have families. And whilst I complained as a child, well, why do we have to go to church on Christmas to give lunch to people we don't even know? Looking back, that was so beautiful of her. She invited all the homeless people in the area to come and eat, and that was the only real Christian thing I think I ever really witnessed in that church. So we would attend church on a Sunday morning and often on a Sunday evening as well. Bible college on a Wednesday, Bible study on a Wednesday, and youth group for me on a Friday once I was a teenager. I also went to a Christian school. And there wasn't many people in my school, maybe 70 people in my year level, but everyone that was there went to church. Everyone was Christian. It wasn't like the Catholic school I went to in year 11 where people said they were Catholic, but no one really was. No one really believed. My Christian school people believed. Absolutely. So if you stepped out of line, everyone let you know about it. I kissed a boy. I was slut-shamed like you wouldn't believe. You know, how could you do such a thing? You should be waiting for your husband. How could you cheapen yourself like that? What would Jesus think? All of that, which is, it's hard enough being a teenager and dealing with puberty and body image issues and, you know, friendship circles and society pressures to then be added with those sorts of guilts and, you know, that sort of, I can't even put it into words. It was not nice. Now the vibe at church, I want to do this justice. I want you to understand how it felt. Sometimes I would go to church, maybe youth group on a Friday or on a Sunday, and there would be a little comment And as women, any women out there watching, we know sometimes the little comments mean big things. The comment might be, didn't you wear that like 2 weeks ago? And you're like, yeah. Well, you're supposed to be dressing up for God. You're supposed to be putting in effort for God when you come to church. That is not Christianity, right? That is very damaging, especially to a young girl, young men and women in the church growing up thinking, oh, okay, now I have to suddenly dress up for God and for the people there, and they're going to call me out if I don't, so I cannot wear the same thing, a couple of weeks in a row, as in a couple of weeks spaced apart. This was, 2, 3, 4 weeks later, and I've worn the same pair of jeans. So suddenly there's this extra pressure to have a bigger wardrobe and to wear makeup and to make sure I was put together perfectly for God, right? A beautiful Christian bride. So there were those sorts of pressures. That is just one example. There were many, many more of that. There was always testimonies in youth group and in church on a Sunday, where people would stand up and say, I was this terrible person. I was a Christian and I backslid. Oh, that word, backslid. I couldn't think of anything worse to call somebody. We would have people come to church and they might have taken a break, even if it was like a holiday. They'd gone on holiday for 3 weeks. Oh my gosh, they haven't been to church. They must have backslid. And here they come, crawling back. So bitchy, so bitchy. It was insane. So we'd have these preachers get up saying, I backslid and I went and did this, and saying all these terrible things they'd done, which in hindsight, a lot of it wasn't really that terrible. And I've come back to God and He's saved me and my life has never been better and all of that, which is great. And then they'd hand around the offerings, tithes and offerings, and say, if you want to have your life saved like this person here, you must put in 10% of your income because you will be gifted back from God sevenfold. 10% of what you make, and that comes back to you times 7. How amazing is our God? That never felt right to me. And I remember the pressure to put something in there. Even when I was a kid, even when I was a teenager, I didn't have money. Even when I was sitting by myself and my parents were over there probably giving money, and I would sometimes, and this is probably not a great thing to admit, I remember ripping up a piece of paper and pretending it was money to put in there just to look like I was fitting in like everybody else. I wonder how many pieces of scrunched up paper they had in their tithes and offerings. Everyone was watching. Everyone was judging. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew what was going on. So some things that didn't feel right to me growing up in the church was asking questions and being told that's what the Bible says. But why does it say that? That's what it says. You need to go home and read your Bible. Okay? My light just went off. So that sort of finality to an answer didn't gel right with me. I'm an Aquarius rising. I need to know why. So the other things that didn't gel right were we would sometimes have homeless people come in. We'd even offer them food, but there was a caveat. They had to sit through an entire service. If you sit through the service, then we'll give you some food. It just felt wrong. It felt wrong to me. It was a way of getting more people in, more bums on seats, more money in their pockets. The other thing that felt wrong was sometimes I would see someone who was not acting the way people should, and they would kick them out of church. They would say, you're not welcome here, go home, because they were maybe not quite right mentally, or maybe, even people that were totally filled with the Spirit sometimes had to leave because they were causing a disturbance. That leads me to another thing. Being in the Pentecostal church, right, I think is one of the most psychic churches. They won't say that. They have all sorts of spiritual gifts that they talk about. So one being the gift of prophecy, which I had, still have, I guess. Then there was the gift of speaking in tongues. There was the spiritual gift of, I've already said prophesying. There was the understanding of tongues and translation of tongues. There was the gift of laying of hands and healing people. And I witnessed these, and that's what makes it hard to leave as well. You see miracles, and you see these fantastic things, and you feel these things. It makes you forget the other parts. It makes you brush them off because, it's real. I've seen it, I've felt it. So when I was young, I would have these visions and I would talk about it. I'd say I had a vision. I had a vision of me up on a stage preaching. So I always thought I was going to be a preacher or a missionary. That was my, future. So that's what I saw, and I would have these prophetic dreams and things like that, which now I see as precognitive dreams or clairvoyance and visions, clairvoyance, and they would happen during, a fit of fervent prayer where you get called up to the altar and you pray and someone comes along, you have people stand behind you, the pastor comes along and prays over you, puts his hand on your head and you fall back. And you'd see people falling over all the time. People would be speaking in tongues, which with my new metaphysical knowledge, I've come to believe may be a form of light language. Like, I don't doubt that people spoke in tongues. My mother spoke in tongues over me one day and healed burns from my body. Like, there is powerful stuff here. There is something to it. And I still believe there is a God. Absolutely, a creator, source energy. But how I felt in that church, how the people made me feel, I didn't feel welcomed. I felt obligated. I felt judged. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, and that is not a way to be. And this was a mega church as well. If you've ever seen one, they are crazy big, and it's since gotten even bigger. Now, when I was 15, my mother and father divorced, and that caused a big uproar in the church, because how could someone, a divorced woman, be on the women's ministry? That's not right. So they said to my mum, "You don't think you can come back here, do you? You don't honestly think you can come back here?" So whilst it's not a massive event of being kicked out of the church, like it sounds like, booted to the curb, that was a very clear, you are not welcome in this church anymore. You are living a life of sin. So my mother got kicked out of the church first, and she had another boyfriend. She decided to move in with that boyfriend when my dad kicked her out of the house, and now that was a physical, literal thing. And seeing my father act like that, I decided to go and live with my mum. I was 16, I wanted my mum, and next thing you know, I'm not welcome at church because I've chosen my mother over my father. And this was major for me because, as I said, I went to a Christian school, and suddenly those children, we had children at our school who were pastors' kids, we had other kids that went to my church, they were suddenly being told by their parents, don't talk to Hannah. Don't hang out with Hannah. She's living in sin. You are not allowed to spend time with her. Now, as a kid, when you're already dealing with all the peer pressure and friendship stuff that goes on, that was a big blow. There was, a lot of cutting out. I wasn't being spoken to by a lot of people, cut out completely. It was very isolating. These were people I had known since birth. I had seen them 4 times a week since birth. My next door neighbours, who we'd also grown up with in the church and at school, they too were not talking to me, and their cousins who I was really good friends with. It was just like I had lost my family, I had lost my community, I had lost everything in my life. Church 4 times a week, all my friends were at church. All my friends at school were church friends. I had nothing. And suddenly I was with my mum and her boyfriend and questioning, what are we doing? Should we find another church? How do we get back in with everyone else? And it was at this stage that I started rebelling as a teenager. I think I'd already started earlier, but I really started rebelling. It was just, it's what teenagers do. You get caught up in emotions and everything, and I thought, fuck yeah, if you don't want me, I don't want you. Let's see what else this world has to offer. And I went off the deep end and did all the things I knew I was not supposed to do. Everything the Bible had said was wrong, and I just did them. And of course, that brings with it a lot of guilt and shame, because I had been conditioned. I've been absolutely conditioned that if you do these things, you go to hell. And I told myself, I don't care, fuck it, I'll go to hell. But then, of course, there is the fact that you're going to go to hell. And that is eternity, and that is forever. And so I had a lot of warring with myself, of almost like, I don't want to do these things anymore. Whatever I was doing, partying, drinking, smoking, all of that, and some other things. And I didn't want to do them anymore because I felt so guilty about it. But I didn't want to go back to the church because I felt so guilty about it. How could they ever take me back? How could I ever be okay with God? And I would pray and I wouldn't hear anything, and I felt totally lost. I think I went through a stage where I just totally believed I was, I think I said I was agnostic, but I don't know if I knew what that meant. I wasn't atheist, but I just definitely didn't believe in the church. How could a church call itself a church and kick out a 16-year-old girl? How could a church call itself a church and do the things that it did, if that makes sense, and put those pressures onto people? And I think the church actually played a major role in my own body image issues and the way I looked and acted, because everyone at church was so perfect. There was this real perfection ideal. And it's very hard to keep up with that. There was no room for error. And if you made a mistake, it was lorded over you. It was, always remembered. And we had people at church. My mum has told me stories of women that would say, God speaks to me all the time. God told me what dress to wear today. He helps me pick out my clothes, which is ridiculous. I mean, maybe what God would have the time of day to help someone pick out a dress to wear to church, but not have the time of day to help someone who's truly in need and help the hungry and the poor. And that was part of my issues as well growing up, is why is he not helping these people? Why does he care if you have sex outside of marriage, but he doesn't care about people dying and people, being tormented? Oh, free will. Free will. It's all free will. Devil's temptations. The devil will tempt you. The devil tries to make it look like it's working. And a lot of the stuff that was said about things like psychics and tarot and the occult and all of that, witches, I grew up knowing that witches were very real. And that if you saw a witch or a tarot reader or anything like that, the information would be correct because it's from the devil. And the devil tries to get you in and lure you in. But really, the devil only speaks lies. So after a time of winning your trust, then he would lead you on the forbidden path. So there was a lot of baggage and issues there as well. And yes, that judgment and feeling of being judged, I think a lot of people can relate to that, being in a church like that. So I'm going to go to that first question now, which was, how do I deal with the shame and the guilt of leaving, giving up on my personal faith, God, family and friends? Well, I didn't really have a choice at first. They gave up on me first. And as a teenager, you go, you give up on me, I'll give up on you. It's very black and white thinking. But the guilt and the shame followed me for a long time, and it's still there. It really is. It's something you really have to work on. I'm trying to keep the relationships with the key people from my childhood. So those next door neighbours that I grew up with and their cousins, they're very, very dear to me. I love them. They are family. And they are all still very much a part of the church. So are my grandparents. My grandparents are still very much part of Christianity. And knowing how easy it is to cut people out of your life from a religious perspective, you know, they don't believe in God, so I shouldn't associate with them, that vibe, makes me very cautious about how I am with them. I don't want to give up on them. Even if people have given up on me, I don't want to give up on them. So I do tiptoe a little bit still, which is uncomfortable, but it's something I've decided is worthwhile doing to keep those relationships because they are still very beneficial and I understand where they're coming from. They think they are right. They think that, you know, I'm going to go to hell and that scares them. So, of course, they want me to come back to church, but I won't. Giving up on God, I don't know if I felt like I was giving up on God. I still prayed, kept that up for a while. There was a long period where I thought God wouldn't want me anyway. Too fucked up, too screwed up, I'd done too many terrible things. Why would he even want me? And those are some of the things that you go through. I really felt the loss of community. I keenly felt that. And I think part of it is allowing yourself to feel that loss and grieving over it. It's a huge chunk of your life, grieving over it. But I also felt the wool, after stepping away, the wool had been lifted from my eyes a little bit. And I could see things for what they truly were and how they had affected me and shaped me and moulded me. Gosh, I didn't believe in climate change. I remember when I went to I moved schools because it got so hard with everyone not talking to me that I begged my mum to move me schools and she switched me to a Catholic school. Best thing ever. I actually learnt things there. But I remember it was English class and we had to write something on global warming and I was the only global warming skeptic in the room. And no one could understand why. And I couldn't understand why everyone believed in global warming. Couldn't believe it because my school, not having proper science, and the church community just didn't believe in that. God wouldn't, you know, do that. God had more control and we were all safe and fine. And, you know, I don't know what the reason behind it was, but there was a lot of climate change skeptics in the church. And I think we see that even in America, a lot of people not believing, and it is based in faith even though it's not clear that it's based in faith. I can see that clearly now. People in the church, for some reason, don't like to believe in climate warming, global warming, climate change. Yes, so shame with leaving, what was the question? Personal faith, God, and family. I think the shame has gone away with time, and there was more shame with things I was doing than what I have left behind. So more shame around I haven't actually been to church. That I'm supposed to go to church. I'm supposed to go to church every week. If I don't go every week, I'm going to go to hell. That was hard. That was fearful. That was very scary. But I wasn't wanted at church, so what do? Find another church? Didn't feel right. There was shame around the partying antics, drinking, smoking, all the rebellious things that it was like half of me did it to see what would happen and the other half did it because I was really hurting. I just lost my family, my parents had split up, so that had been torn apart, and then my church family all at the same time. Sorry, there's someone doing a burnout in my street. I'll pause this for a second. I guess when you're bored, you just go and do burnouts. Anyway, so yes, there was more shame about my actions and what that would mean and the consequences that would come along with that. So the next question was about losing friends and community, which I think I have detailed a little bit. When I lost my friends at school, I went and found the only non-Christian friends I could find. I made friends. I went to all the after parties I could find. My brother used to ride motorbikes, so I went and made friends down at the motocross track and hung out with them. So I wasn't afraid of making new friends, and I purposely chose people not in the church, almost as a protective measure. Like, if they're not religious, they can't kick me out. They can't use that against me. Of course, none of those friends are still around, but most of the church ones aren't, and that's life, I think. Now, the next one, fear of hell. That's very real. Very real. If you have watched my video on past lives where I talk about my supernatural experiences, and that was after my very first time seeing a tarot reader when I was traveling solo through New Orleans, and then I had something attach itself to me, and it was absolutely, in hindsight, absolutely demonic, very negative entity that brought back a lot of fear. And I prayed like proper prayers for the first time in quite a few years, because by that point I was 21. I had, a lot of it had been dulled, all that sort of fear and guilt and shame had dulled a little bit. But yes, that, oh, now we've got Air Force planes flying overhead. Sorry guys for the noises. Yes, I think the fear of hell definitely came back up, and I've had to deal with that quite a bit. I still deal with that today. You know, the idea that there is some chance it could be real. There is a chance. I don't know. Nobody knows. I have my new beliefs now, and they are slowly displacing those old fears. But when you've grown up with that and you've been conditioned to believe that there is a place where people go when they are evil and they don't have God in their hearts, yes, it can be hard to leave that behind. I wanted to mention another thing as well. The church often preach that as long as you have accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Saviour into your heart, then you're going to heaven. And some of my questions were, but what if you are, you know, in an adulterous relationship, but you love and accept Jesus in your heart? Then what? And so, well, you love and accept Jesus in your heart, you're going to heaven. It's like, well, that's kind of weird double standard, don't you think? Like, can't you, like, and where do we draw the line? You know, I actually read the Bible. I've read it front to back 3 times. You know, what about all this other stuff the Bible says? And they used to have multiple wives. Is that what we're supposed to do? Oh, no, we don't do that. So why do we pick and choose? Why is that not part of the Bible, but this part is? Why is it like this? And I couldn't wrap my head around it. And because I didn't fully understand their reasons, it was, oh, someone's told us this, so that's what we say. That helped me lose my faith a little bit as well. And looking back and researching again. And I still research. I mean, I've got the book of Christian doctrine that my mother had from Bible college. I still read that. I have a really great book called Learn the Bible in 24 Hours, and it's just a great way of flicking through and remembering the storylines and the reasons for things being written the way they are. Whilst they're Christian books, reading it from this perspective is thoroughly intriguing and interesting. I have a book behind me called Biblical Demonology. I've read up on Enochian magic recently, and the story of, I read the book of Enoch the Prophet, which is a banned book of the Bible, so of course I wanted in. That was one that was not included when they decided to make their choices. And the book of Enoch talks about the watchers, which are the angels that were set around the earth to watch over man, and how they decided to mate with the women, and they bore children to them called the Nephilim, and they were like giants and they were evil, and that's why God sent the flood to get rid of all of those with impure blood. Okay, you won't find that in standard biblical text, but that whole book talks about biblical demonology and angelology as well, and the hierarchy and everything. And oh gosh, it fascinates me. I still don't know if I take it as absolute truth, because it does again detail like hell and heaven and all of that. I don't know. But the other thing, having my mother in Bible college, she was able to tell me, you know, how they chose these books, and how a lot of people in theology school come out not Christian because a a lot of things are taken out of context in the church these days. So when you step out of the church, it is really helpful to continue studying the text and the things to sort of help move your beliefs past it, if that makes sense. So knowing that a lot of the things said in the Bible, like I was taught that the earth was created in 7 days. That's it. Close the book and end of discussion. But my mother has informed me that 7 days back, way back when, it didn't really mean 7 days. This was a metaphor, a way of saying God is powerful because he can do this in such a short time. You know, it was a way of getting a story across, because these stories were spoken before they were written. And then, you know, we have Abraham who lived for hundreds of years, and all these other stories of people living for hundreds of years, and Sarah having a baby at the age of 90, like crazy things that are not possible. But in the Christian world, they say this is absolute truth. Whereas no, it was a way of saying this person was so powerful, this is how old they were. They didn't really live that old, but that's how you got that across. It's like when we say, you know, this dragon was 20 feet tall, or he was as big as a mountain. Like, you have to exaggerate to get the point across that this is a really powerful person, or it's a really powerful being. It was all methods of verbal storytelling, but the church has grasped it and taken it as absolute truth. And that's where it gets a bit funky. Okay, telling my family and friends of my new beliefs. So getting to where I am now in terms of my beliefs, I am now almost 30, okay? So all of this happened when I was 15, 16 years old, and it has taken a long time to establish myself and understand what I am and how I identify and what I believe in. And my beliefs are still changeable, and I think that's a great part about being a witch, is you can choose to believe what you want to believe based on circumstantial evidence, right? So what happens to you, what you feel, and whilst I still take in a lot of the things from when I was younger, I see them in a different light now. So clairvoyance, I've obviously had that ability for a long time, but I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know how to use it or develop it, and now I do. And I do think it is God-given. I don't agree with, whilst I use the term God, I probably mean creator, and I think the creator is both masculine and feminine, if it is any gender at all. I think the term God is just so ingrained in me, that's what I come out and say sometimes, but it's source energy, it's where we all come from. I've read a lot in Hermetic philosophy, and I actually gel with that quite a bit, and that is that our reality is purely mental, everything is mental, and we are all a part of the creator. We are not gods ourselves, but we are tiny little threads of the creator, and this is his way of exploring himself and knowing himself, their self, better through multiple scenarios, putting us in multiple different lives and happenings and different things, and seeing how we react and all of that. So my beliefs have changed, but because I believe in this creator, when I tell my friends and family, I can be very selective. My husband obviously knows everything because he's my husband, and I speak to him freely and openly. So when I went through my spiritual awakening and my gifts started to really make themselves known, and I remember trying to tell him that I'd met a spirit guide. Good Lord, that was terrifying to do, because I thought he'd think I was crazy. And I just said, look, this is going to be a bit out there, but I had something happen in meditation, and I want to let you know about it because it's exciting and it's interesting and it's been validated for me, but you might not believe in it, and that's okay. And whilst I don't know what his full beliefs are, I know that he believes me and he trusts me, and I can be myself around him, and that is all I ask. I do tarot readings for him all the time now, and it's great. He's totally up with all my witchy business. It's great. Then my grandparents, for example, I went to visit them in February for my grandmother's 80th birthday, and I'm actually interviewing her for a book that I'm writing about her and her story, which is very interesting and intriguing. But she, as I said, is full of religious fervour. So I didn't take my tarot cards, I was very careful in what I'd say. So she would say things like, oh, you understand that, Hannah, you love God, and you know, you understand in the Bible it says this, this and this, and I would just nod and say, yes, Nana, I do love God. Yes, I understand. It would be more pain to her if I said, I don't believe in the God that you believe in, and oh, the Bible's a load of crap, and I'm actually a witch. Like, that would put her pacemaker to the test, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to hurt her. She's she's past that. And understanding her story and where she's from, she's not well educated, she didn't really do any schooling, she doesn't have that reasoning capability and the ability to question things like I do. So I need to meet her on her level. I can't expect her to come to mine. So that's how I deal with that with her. I don't share with her all the things I'm doing. I just don't. And then I've got other friends. So one of my really close friends who I grew up with in the church, etc. I was nervous as all hell trying to tell her when I'd started my business, because that was sort of when it became real. I was putting myself out there and she could come across it. And finally, and especially, I moved to Perth, so I had to do all this over the phone. I couldn't tell her in person, so it felt a bit funny. But I called her one day and I just wanted to tell you I started my own business. She was like, that's amazing, well done, what are you doing? And I said, well, it's a tarot and astrology business. Here's my website, you're welcome to have a look over it. I'm really happy with it. And she said, and I thought she would, because she's still in the church, still goes to church, her family's in the church, everything. I expected I can't be friends with you if you're doing that type of thing, even though she was a bridesmaid and we're very, very close. But no, she gave me her full support. She said, I'm so proud of you for starting your own business. That's such a big step. Whilst it's not my thing, I fully support you. Like, that is a good Christian. That is amazing. It was amazing. So that made it easier for me to then tell other people. I have friends that aren't Christians and I've told them, I'm a tarot reader and this is what I do, and they've been so supportive. They've been like, that is so awesome, I need to get a reading sometime. People without those religious beliefs are so much easier to deal with. But there's still people in my life that I haven't told, and I am just being wary of what I know it will do to them, because they will worry themselves sick that I'm going to hell. So I still need to be a little bit cautious, and whilst that doesn't feel wholly great, I think sometimes it's necessary. And that's the same if you're in the broom closet. We don't have to go around and declare who we are to everyone and everything. And we can do it with a select few, as long as we can be ourselves with the people that matter most. That's what's important. Even telling my dad was hard. He doesn't go to church anymore. He remarried someone who wasn't Christian, and he's still got a lot of those hang-ups and beliefs from his childhood and his upbringing. So when I told him that I was doing this, I don't think I ever said to someone, I am a witch, although it is kind of, if they look at my website, it's kind of obvious. But I told him that I was a tarot reader and astrologer, and he went, oh, it's all a bunch of crap. Nah, you're just telling people what they want to hear. That's all a scam. I don't believe in any of that crap. And that's what I expected from him. He's an Aussie bloke, farmer, builder, man. I didn't expect anything more. But he doesn't hate me for it. He doesn't want to hear about it, and that's a bit hard because I want to tell him when it's doing well. But he doesn't hate me for it. So that's fine. And it was the same, you know what? It's very similar to when I went vegan and I had to tell my friends and family who were absolutely not vegan. Very similar results. Some people were like, awesome, that's great, so glad to hear it. But then there were some people that, like my dad, were like, what's wrong with you? Where do you get your protein from? You're going to die. So it's similar, coming out in any form. I'm sure some people who are gay as well may have similar vibes, that it's terrifying to do it. But my main advice is give people the chance to accept and love you for who you are. If you don't tell them, you're taking that chance away from them to prove you wrong. So if they don't love you for who you are, whilst it hurts, you're not meant to have them in your life. You don't want people like that. Again, being cautious and understanding of where people are at. So I wouldn't still go and tell my grandmother, I'm a witch and I do all this, but other people in my life, like my friends, who are a bit younger and actually have an education, that's a different story. And then the last question, any backlash? Not so much backlash in deciding not to return. I think I went so far off the deep end when I was a teenager, in just rebelling and doing my own thing, that no one really said anything to me. I had a lot of people say things about me, but not to me. And even now I have a few family members and friends that say, oh, we're doing church online at the moment because of coronavirus. Here's a link. Do you want to watch it? I'd love for you to come. and I appreciate it. I've stepped foot back in the church as well. I have gone back for my stepbrother. He's still very much a part of the church. I've gone back and sat through a service. I've sat through some of the Christmas specials as well. Sorry, it's another plane. But it's just not for me. And it feels weird to be there. It feels wrong. So it's not for me. But I'll still, oblige and try it out every now and then. I miss the community. I miss the fellowship. I even miss the praise and worship songs. I mean, I grew up, those were like my soundtrack to my life. I watched Greenleaf recently, and that made me really miss the church. And I think it was more the feeling of knowing where everyone's at and sort of not being on the same page. Familiarity, maybe. Knowing what's expected of you as well. You're supposed to put your hands up when you're praising God or worshipping, and you're supposed to close your eyes when someone's praying, and you're supposed to say this, and you're supposed to stand here. Knowing the rules, that was really crucial, I think. And outside the church, you kind of just got to figure it out, right? But anyway, that's my very long-winded, probably not very well-worded. Again, first time I've actually told this story. So if you actually have any more specific questions, I hope this has helped you, and pop them in the comments or send me a DM, and I will potentially do another more concise version of this video. And I'm hoping to write a blog post as well to help people on this similar journey. All I can say is you have to trust yourself, and you have to trust the journey. You have to feel the feelings. You can't hide and run away from them and hide them in drugs and alcohol like I did. That was not smart, but it has got me to where I am today. You have to trust yourself and trust what you know. And just in closing as well, I do believe that our Creator, I honestly believe that our Creator needs a diversity of worship. So like our soil needs a diversity of microbes in it to thrive, and we need a diversity of trees and plants for the planet to survive, and a diversity of animals and a diversity of people in society. I think we need to provide a diversity of worship. So whether that is multi-deities in your pagan practice, or if it is working with saints and working with spirits in your witch practice, or whether it is as a Christian praising God, or as a Jew worshipping Yahweh, or if it is worshipping Muhammad or anyone else, any of the religions, I think they're all necessary, and I think they all play a part. They can be damaging, they can be beautiful. I don't begrudge anyone that's in the church. My particular church was quite damaging to me, but I can't speak for all churches as well. So there's my 2 cents. I hope this has helped, and I'll chat to you guys next time.